Okay, so welcome everybody to our second session of Learning Tarot with me, Alice. And we are going to be exploring the Major Arcana today. That's right, isn't it? On your guys, what you got? Yeah, I was just suddenly panicked and thought, oh my gosh, I thought I was like 100% sure I've sat and sorted all my Major Arcana out. But you know, when you just have that little self-doubt creep in. So we'll be doing the Major Arcana this session and the next session, because there's obviously quite a lot of cards within that gamut. But I'll begin just back to basics. So a lot of people, when they are starting to learn tarot, they don't know what the Major Arcana are, and they don't know what the Minor Arcana are. And I think that language is quite archaic in some ways. It sounds really old and unfamiliar. But they're basically groups. They're like gangs. They're segments of the cards. So we have the Minor Arcana, which is the vast majority of the cards. It's like 58 cards, but we'll worry about those later. They're like the gritty details of life. Whereas the Major Arcana are the big gang, you know, the big group of themes and stories that really, if we're lucky and we live a long life, we'll get to know each and every one. But when you pick up a deck of cards, say like when I did when I was 13, you know, it takes you only have so much life experience. It takes a long time to start to understand what some of these major cards represent or what they really mean. So you can obviously pick up a book and get like a generic idea of what these cards like meanings are. But I think for the majors, until you've really lived through them, they can feel quite elusive. And so there's some that you're always going to be sort of familiar with from, like, let me just have a quick skim. So things like the Fool, you know, it's language that we're all kind of familiar with. But we talked about this card last week and what it can mean. And I think a lot of people will jump to the idea that that means foolishness, but actually it's more about the kind of the healthy fool, the jumping into life, the evolution, or something like the Magician. Like we all know what an idea of a magician is, but it's more, you know, sacred and profound perhaps than those more sort of easy to grasp concepts. And then there's some that I guess are really, so like I said, the Empress, you know, is Queen and Empress King. Things like the Hierophant is quite, it's just like an unknown quantity to a lot of people when you pick up a deck of cards. Like what even is that? And we'll come to it. People think that they want to get the Lover's card, you know. They might not. That can be a deeply challenging card. And some of them, you know, they feel easier, like Strength. And you know, 30 years in, there are certain cards that I feel like I've not fully got yet. Strength is one of them. Like it has a really clear message, and I've had to be strong, but I still feel like there's something about that card that is missing for me, in terms of life experience. And I don't know, I think that's maybe I'll discover. I'm one of these, I always think I'm ridiculously lucky. I'm 44 years old, and I still, until recently, had pretty much all my grandparents, and you know, I've not really experienced much death, and I think that might be where the strength comes. But yeah, then there's of course death. So big archetypal thing that we all have to go through. We all have to witness it, be with it, have it happen to us eventually. But again, the thing we want to kind of put to the back of our minds and not think about. Temperance is probably another word that feels, again, quite old-fashioned and archaic and difficult to relate to. The Devil, we just all get, people tend to get scared and think of external devils. The Tower. Tower's really having its moment. People at the minute all over social media talk about tower moments, and I'm not fully, I think it sounds quite frightening, and I think for the most part it's not, but we'll come to that. And then we have the Moon, the Judgment. That took me a long time to get to know and to understand, and then I had to sit with it, that card coming out on repeat for like a year, in really dire circumstances. So now I feel like I know that card. But what I'm going to just do, I'm going to read from my book Dirty and Divine, just a little tiny segment about the Major Arcana. Okay, so we begin with the Major Arcana, the home of archetypal power. These are big cards that span the gamut of humanity. Herein we have the whole rat race, the whole angelic host of all that you are. Each card reflects a slice of yourself, people you have known, who you would like to be, and who you would not. Beyond this, they are the themes of life: war, peace, love, hate, pride, and failure. All of this is encapsulated within the universe that is you. Tarot has a lovely way of pulling it out, showing it to you, making you observe your humanity, yet the knowing, the inner understanding we can garner if we open our eyes to all that we are, well, that really is something special. And I do think that the Major Arcana are quite special. Some people just choose to just use the Major Arcana sometimes for readings. And I think that's a good thing to do on occasion, because sometimes you just are in a crisis, or you just need a big answer to a big problem, a big decision, and actually just pulling out one of these without messing around with the kind of grit of the Minor Arcana can be quite empowering. It can just tell you, right, this is who you need to be in this circumstance, which is nice. And I think on that note, we all have things going on in our lives, and we're all kind of here to do something about tarot. So let's have sorry guys, I should have told you to pull out all your Major Arcana cards. I should have told you that before.
That's what I've been doing while I've been listening to you.
So my apologies that I forgot to give you a heads up on that, but do that now, and I'll talk for a little bit longer, and then also do that again for next week. So
are there 22? Is that right? Did you say
21?
21. Okay, I must have not counted.
Is well, yeah. No, I guess together 22, because the Fool is 0.
Oh, right. Okay, fine.
It's be confusing.
Right, got those.
So what I'll have us do in a moment is just shuffle your cards. Don't worry too much about getting them in order. And pull one for yourself. So this will be representing that same thing that I just kind of talked about, the idea of who we are at this moment, or who, in fact, let's change that question. Who is it we should be looking to embody? What energy is best for us to embody at this moment? And then we can have a little chat about each one that we get. Okay, so I'll give mine a shuffle reluctantly, because I spent a lot of time putting them in order. Okay, so just another thing with shuffling, because I know that can be a source of worry for people, is you can shuffle like I do, very basic shuffling. If you know fancy ways, do that. I just shuffle till I feel it's enough, which you'll get a feel for the more familiar you get with the cards. If you can't really shuffle, another way is to just spread them out in a line and then pull whatever card feels right. You can just mash them up and mess them up on the floor too. It doesn't matter. Right, so whenever you're ready.
Right, yeah, I don't feel like I want this one particularly. The Lovers, as you said.
I knew this one was coming for me, so I got
that's pregnant lady mouse.
Yeah,
I'm behind, but only because my dog kicked my deck over.
Oh. Are you doing yours again then, Becky? Or
yeah, no, I'm just a little bit behind. I'm just doing them now.
Okay, no worries. Well, we'll start talking about yours.
Hanged Man.
Which one? Hanged Man.
Hanged Man.
Okay, so that probably won't feel like a sort of energy that you want to give yourself over to, but you might. I'll come to it. Which one was yours again, Gabriella?
Oh, the Lovers.
The Lovers. Okay. Are you in a partnership?
I am. I've been married for nearly 25 years. Right.
So that would be suggesting that you put yourself into questions and thoughts in relation to that relationship. So you said that you weren't that keen on that coming out. Yeah.
Well, I just because maybe it's partly because you mentioned how it's not always a good card to get. I've never had it.
To the things. I think what it is with the Lovers, it's not that it's not a good card, it's this hard card, because relationships are hard. And actually we can really dodge them and avoid them. So we all have, I think people,
That's me.
not that they have they have an idea of what love should be, and we've all swallowed the myth of Disney and Prince Charming and blah blah blah, blah, and the idea of soulmates and perfect people out there for us. But actually, it's more about becoming the perfect person yourself, and them doing work on themselves and finding ways to kind of cohabit and
no, that I like.
Yeah. But I think that's when I say that people don't like the lovers, it's that they don't realize that there's a hell of a lot of work comes with that, particularly with that committed, ongoing, long term relationship.
Do you know what comes up for me is that I don't like it, because to me it suggests that I'm going to be tempted by something. But that's my interpretation, and I don't want that.
Well, if you don't want it, then what you would do is bring
it's
yourself
not
back.
very likely, but I don't want something saying it could be, and you need to watch out. It's that side of it.
It's not a warning. It's not a warning. For me, it's bring yourself to the heart of your current relationship. And if there's any areas there that need work, do the work and be like more embodied within that relationship. Because again, you know, after such a long time together, I'm sure some things get taken for granted, or, you know, you go your own sort of separate ways while still being together. And it's about coming back and kind of reviewing and figuring out the next stages and phases. So it's not a negative card. So sorry I put that into your head.
No, that's all right.
It's actually a rather lovely card. You got all those roses underneath you that presents the very real basis of love that the relationship is built upon, and two people who are both suited and booted, who are kind of in their own individual power, but the coming together is over that one microphone stand between them. Like, how is communication as well? How are they going to communicate in a way and share that mic in the way that you have to share your lives? So perhaps, are you going to Spain together?
No, we're not. I'm going on my own to see my dad.
Okay, well, perhaps once you're back from there, you can spend some time, like maybe consciously and purposefully make some time.
Yes, it's more me that I have to work. He's great, but I'm the one that's a bit I take him for granted because he's so loving. Does that make sense? And I'm so into my work that I need to give him more time. There's a lot of things I can improve about me. I mean, he's happy, but there's a lot of improvement that could be made, put it that way.
I think that card is just saying, put some energy spent on your love life with him will be energy well spent, and it's where you're being directed. So, you know, much as I'm feeling, I'm very much being directed to my children. So I have the Empress, and I spent the whole of last year, obviously. Well, I didn't create these cards last year. We didn't. It was the year before, but we spent the whole of last year talking about these cards and planning them and getting ready. And they were the thing that I was birthing then. And I have felt very, very called to come back to the roost. Not that I ever left it. I'm here the whole time. But, you know, in my head, mum mode a little bit more forefront. Because like you, Gabriella, I'm constantly dogged by ideas and creative things that I need to be doing, and actually part of that needs to be my children. So I was expecting that card to come out. It's come out for me loads lately. So that's nice. What did you get, Becky?
Hanged Man.
Oh, that was it. Hanged Man. Oh gosh, right. So it doesn't feel like a very joyful card. Sorry, she has a coughing fit. It's a good. Is it, you using the Rebel Heart Tarot?
I've got the Light Seeker that I'm using mostly.
That's nice.
I've had that for a while, and that one I feel like I've kind of bonded with. So I've only had Rebel Heart a little while. Yeah. Just
so I can see the particular. Oh, it's hard to see. Oh, she looks cool though. Okay.
Yeah, it's nice. It's not a deck it's quite a light deck, which is why I think I like it.
Yeah.
It's not the worst card I think I could have got.
No, I think it's
surprising card either.
Right, exactly. And I think that's the thing, is it's the cards reflect where we already are, you know, and the things that we probably already know. So you probably already know you're a little bit stuck or a bit stagnant and you can't move on in the way you would like to. But I think the Hanged Man gives us real power and potential to make the most of where we are right now. And it might be for a while, it might be for a few months, but it constantly brings us back to that being in the moment and the being here now. kind of thing, which can be very tedious when we'd rather be elsewhere, but just use it to its best advantage and figure, well, I'm not going to be able to move forward until I've figured out some stuff about myself and really dug into the moment. So I think that's an example of how powerful the Major Arcana would be. So obviously if we shuffle the minors, which we will do at some point, and pull a card, we'll probably, you can get cards within the minors that feel big. So like the kings, queens, all of them, and the aces and the tens can feel like quite big cards. But for the most part, they can also feel quite gritty and like transient. They come and they go. Whereas these ones that we've pulled today with the majors, they're like big. They're here for a little while, if not for a long while. They're things that we really need to bring our attentions to. And so when they come up in a reading, along with the minors, obviously their meaning can shift a little bit. But I think just using them on their own to do a reading like that, just one card, can be so helpful and just redirect us straight back to where we need to be, really. So any questions about what the Major Arcana are? No?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, and is everybody happy with the term archetypes?
Yeah.
For what they are, so the big kind of themes of life. So I think Jung kind of pinpointed some archetypes, and then, well, he's not the only one. Marion Woodman, I think, pinpointed some archetypes that were more for the female. But one of the things I really like about the tarot, and I write about it in Dirty and Divine, is there's no judgment within any of these cards. Well, there is a judgment card, but there's no judgment. And I was reading something I wrote the other day about the kind of femininity that we find within the Major Arcana, and indeed all through the Minor Arcana. That's not the modern version. Like, there's no sluts, there's no whores, there's no bitches, Queen of Swords might have a bit of a bitchy edge, but there's none of that, kind of contemporary disparaging of the feminine within tarot, which is lovely. And in fact, there is quite a lot of empowered feminine with it, just as there is empowered masculine. And some of the minor cards will bring a difficult, darker edge to that, but there is just a purity to the essence. So if you looked through your whole Major Arcana, whilst there's difficult cards, there's not judgmental, there's no judgment on people. It's like even with the devil, it's like it holds such empathy with the person who's looking at it. If you look at it that way, it's not saying you're a bad person, it's saying you are being plagued by problems, and inner troubles. So it is nice to kind of work with the tarot. I don't think they're problematic in that way, generally. I mean, I'm sure there are decks that are potentially problematic or that are quite white. I think that's a bit of a problem of tarot in the past. Like, it's a problem of all of our culture and society, is that, I think the Rider-Waite, everybody's just white. Of course they are, because they come from that time when that was standard. But these things are changing now. And there's all kinds of depictions you can find upon these cards. But yeah, so what I thought I'd do now is run through some of the cards. I wanted to do some today and some in the next session. So now I've not got my cards in the right order. So you'd think by now I should be able to remember the order the cards go in. And I do surprise myself with it, but I'm not going to, I don't do tarot to learn things by rote. So that's why I say don't learn from the book. So I'm never going to remember the order properly. So the first card we have is the Fool. And just to kind of give an overview, is the last card within the tarot Major Arcana is the World. So I feel like there's a journey there. You might think of it as the hero's journey. It's the journey of stepping out into the world to all the way through to ownership of the world in whatever way that fits for you. It doesn't mean you have to become a prime minister or ridiculous billionaire or anything like that and own the world, but like ownership of your own world. And of course you could, it's not a straight line, it never is, and you're going to go back and forth, and but that's the general kind of set out of the journey. So from those foolish, intrigued, curious first steps through to standing strong and feeling like sovereign and that you've created or done something, or, you know, can kind of claim the world as your own a little bit. So the Fool, we talked about this. I feel like we talked about this a little bit last week. Naivety, daring, flow, transformation, risk, and innocence. So whenever this card comes up, I would ask you to kind of consider what risks you might be taking, what risks you might not be taking. I think sometimes it comes up when we are in need of a push, you know, like perhaps we've been prevaricating on the edge of something for a little while. And we need a reminder that perhaps we'll be safe, or perhaps even the looniest, craziest things that we desire to do will take us in the right direction eventually. So that's the Fool. That's our first step out into space, into the world. And obviously each deck will be different, so I'll try and just give a generic meaning. So the next card in the Major Arcana is the Magician. So we have, I think this is like, if we're thinking about it as a journey, so the Fool is stepping out with very little to his name. He's got maybe a backpack or a bag or something like that. The Magician is in that slightly more experienced place where he's beginning to recognize the value of his skills and his tricks and the things that he's learned in life, and bringing them all together to begin to, I guess, manifest, to create, to cause life to happen in his favor. Which is interesting. So I was talking to someone, a client today, about, like, if we were to put them by ages, and it'd be hard to put them all by ages, but I feel like this would almost be like childhood or very early 20s, kind of stepping out into the world for the first time. And then the Magician's like 25 and you think you know it all, and and because you think you know it all, you actually sometimes can create some really interesting scenarios and things. But yeah, the Magician is also deeply powerful and can be returned to at any age with all the new tools that you have, and all the new experiences. And he has a pentacle, a cup, a sword, and a wand coming out of his hat in this image, which just shows that he has all the tools of the Minor Arcana, because as we will discuss, the Minor Arcana, as you probably know, is separated into the swords, cups, pentacles, and wands. So he has all of that within his kind of magic hat, his remit, to begin to use. And he's also tricky. I always think with the Magician, you know, if you were inquiring about a circumstance or another person, you might think that, not that they're up to no good, but that perhaps tricks are being employed or manipulation. And we all manipulate. We manipulate our circumstances, we manipulate our bank accounts, we manipulate our skills to their best ability. So it's not always a bad thing. I guess it can be at times, because, like, you know, the cards reflect life. So, but don't jump to that conclusion. It's just about bringing all of our skills and tools to the surface. Any question about either of those two? No? Okay. And I just, as you're listening to me talk, I would ask you to think about how you feel about the cards. Like, so, and you might want to even take note about this, but do you like the Magician? Do you like the Fool? Or is there something in any of the cards that I talk about that you don't like? And I think that starts to build up a picture of who you are right now, what you find acceptable or what you find comfortable. And that in itself is a reading of some kind. You could do as homework, literally just put all of your Major Arcana out kind of in a way that so you can see all the images, and just go through and like pull out your favorite 6 and your least favorite 6, and then all the others just put them to the side, and then have a look at what the differences are between the favorite 6 and the least favorite, and what is that sort of saying about you. So that would be quite a fun thing that you could do either after this session or at some point before the next session, just to kind of think, okay, so the ones that you like are probably the ones that you're going to feel comfortable with, that feel a little bit like you, or that feel like your hopes and ambitions, whereas the ones you don't like are maybe things you're afraid of, things that you have experienced that you did not enjoy, or things that you don't fully understand yet. So anyway, the third card is the High Priestess. So weirdly, I never quite understand this, because I quite like the High Priestess. I love the High Priestess. I've had a few women have a very visceral and strong reaction to her, where they feel like they don't like her. And I wonder if that's because we've become so cut off from our power and our instincts and our spirituality, that actually seeing a woman in a position of kind of celestial spiritual power is slightly intimidating. And perhaps makes us feel our own lack a little bit, if we feel like we're lacking it. But this is actually my mother's partner, who is indeed a minister. So she seemed like the perfect person to use in this card. And then we've gone quite a traditional route with the pillars and the moon at her feet. There's quite a lot of symbolism in the original Rider-Waite, some of it a bit biblical. But I quite like the idea of these books in the background, because it's like the Akashic records, the records of all of life are within her, and she can access them. She has her lovely comfy chair and her lamp that's going to light her way, and she looks quite approachable. And this was not on purpose, but when we took this photograph, she had pearls in her hand, which was not something we thought about at all when we put it into the picture, or if we did, it was like a side thing, because it wasn't on purpose. But they're like pearls of wisdom. But that was just because Karen, the lady in the card, wanted to hold pearls. Now maybe she thought about that, I'm not sure. She may well have done. But yeah, it's a powerful card. So the next one along. Any questions about the High Priestess? Okay, so next we have the Empress. So I quite like about these cards that you have I get that the Fool and the Magician, they tend to be masculine, like presented as, I mean, ours are female, but they're both Nikki, the artist, but they do tend to traditionally be presented as masculine. But I think then the first two most powerful cards of the Major Arcana to come through that feel like they've got some real weight is the High Priestess and the Empress. So they're the next ones along, which is like, yeah, you come into life and you're a bit raring to go, and then you've got your mother, or you've got a feminine influence, or I don't know, or you should, if things were more equal. They've got this tempering kind of, the High Priestess followed by the Empress, this filter of femininity that you have to kind of move through, which I don't think we have in our modern culture. Is perhaps coming back, but I feel like maybe the world would be a better place if we were filtered by High Priestesses and Empresses a little bit more. So then we have the Empress. So she's motherhood, but also creative femininity. I think it's being pregnant with any kind of idea that needs to be birthed, that goes beyond yourself. So it can be artistic things, it can be work related things, it can be a bloody good idea to make a cake at the weekend, that you're going to then feed your family with, or your friends. But there is that empowerment of wanting to nurture both yourself and your ideas and the people who you care for, or your community. So I don't think it has to be at all about being pregnant, although of course it can be literal pregnancy too. But I don't like to go down the literal routes too much.
I was going to say something very literal. It's about harvesting or the fruits of your labor or something like that.
Yeah, and of course any of these cards can apply to anyone, whatever their gender, whether they are male or non-binary or whatever. They're just aspects of humanity that happen to have been fitted into a gender. But we've messed about a bit with a gender, me and Nikki. It's probably we've heavily skewed things feminine wise. And other people do different with other decks. I saw a man, a gay guy, who has created quite a few masculine decks where they're basically all the characters are masculine, and more power to him. I think we all need decks that we can relate to, and it's all good, really.
I was going to say, is there a card called the Emperor or anything like that?
I mean, next.
There is, okay.
So the Emperor comes after the Empress, which is just how it should be, I think. And like I said, if the world was perhaps how it was more, how it should have been, how things were back in ancient times that none of us remember.
Yeah.
I think women would have been more in control. Some of the, if anyone has read If Women Rose Rooted, I highly recommend it. It's not a tarot based book, but it is a spiritual based book about feminine power and leadership and becoming ourselves in a way that we haven't yet perhaps explored, because I think feminism kind of went down the we can be men route, or we can be as good as men, and now the backlash is that women are actually wanting to be women, but we don't really know what that looks like. So kind of re-engaging with that. And she tells a lot of stories, Celtic based stories of kind of mythical ancient stories that connect us to our own ancient history and spiritual history, which really puts women into a different position than more recent history has done, more empowered position, but also very different, like not necessarily as rulers, but as influencing rulers and stuff like that.
What book was that, Alice?
If Women Rose Rooted, I can never blooming remember it. It's a bit of a mouthful to say. If Women Rose Rooted by Sharon Blackie. It's really interesting. So then we have the Emperor. So he's there. This is Nikki's dad, the artist's dad. And he's holding his crystals, which we forced him to hold. And he's got like a shield, which I think was a water drop that Nikki cut out with some kind of button or something over the top. Very clever. And the moon, but he's very so the Empress is kind of chill, and she's there with her field producing her stuff, and whereas he's on the road out to work doing his due. He gets stuff done. He probably has a team of people supporting him. I always struggled with the Emperor because I haven't, the male influences around me haven't been that strong. Like my dad was quite a feminine man, is quite a feminine man to a certain extent. And then you think of emperors like presidents and prime ministers and kings, and most of them, there's kind of irksome bad behavior going on, and dictators and stuff like that. So I've always had to try and force myself to rethink what an emperor is. Like, what would an emperor be if he was in a good place, in a good mood, in a good divine masculine emperor? And that's when Nikki came up with putting her dad in there, because he sounded like he kind of fitted that role. And we wanted a good guy in there. So I guess that's the thing, is this card could come out and represent those more irksome, difficult emperors, or it could represent something that is more divine. If it comes out for yourself, then I guess you plow yourself in the direction of the divine male aspects of yourself, and particularly as that relates to work, getting things done, powering on, self-confidence, protection of other people, and all of that. So he's roaring in. So then after the Emperor, we have the Hierophant, which is traditionally a male card, but we spun it up to be a woman. That's actually a lady I did hypnotherapy and NLP course with years ago, called Alexia, and she's a wonderful wise soul. So the Hierophant, like I said, is one of those cards that, I mean, what does that even mean? It's like I'm going to have to go away and Google that, because I know what it means in that it used to represent a priest, but I've never Googled it to find out how that word was used outside of tarot. So I will have a look at that. But it's that the person who sits as holder of wisdom. So that used to be spiritual wisdom. But I think in this modern day and age, there is so much wisdom that this person just represents somebody who has committed their life to something, and they have the information that you need to be able to move forward. So honestly, that could be an estate agent. It could be a doctor. It could be a teacher, a therapist, a priest, you know, all kinds of different people. It could be me in this circumstance, you know, or you guys, if you were out teaching. It's somebody who has a pure relationship to their work and shares it with people in a fair and just way to help everybody kind of grow.
So does it relate more to somebody else in your life then, rather than you yourself in that instance?
I think that's where it gets a bit tricky sometimes, because you can start to debate what that means. So it would depend on the question, I suppose. So, and what your scenario was.
Yeah, exactly. So you could probably work that out yourself. That's the whole point, isn't it?
That's the thing, is you have to sort of sit with it. So if the question was, I'm worried about my well-being, what do I do? And this card comes up, well, that would probably suggest you're not in this position quite yet, but maybe you need to go see a doctor or somebody else who can help you. But if the question was, do I become a life coach? Then this would be like, yes, this is your information to share and give. And so
I see, yes.
Yeah, so it's figuring. I think what really helps is asking the right questions. No. And then being willing to interrogate what comes out, not as like a yes or a no, but what is the information, what is the story being told. And of course it gets more complicated when you're then doing more complex readings, and there'll be other cards around this, but we'll come to that. And it's just, they'll influence it. So you could have like a minor card here that influences how you go about doing that, but again, that's for you to kind of sit with and journal on and try and figure out, read the book and think, okay, how do these relate, that kind of thing. I mean, it keeps your brain quite fresh.
Yeah, I bet.
Tarot. So the next one is the Lovers. So this one, again, it's that then moving into partnership and union. So all the other cards have been single and solo and figuring things out for yourself. You could even look at them as kind of being born into the world, being given a faith, having your parents, kind of figuring out how life works. Then, you know, your Hierophants, your teachers. And then at some point you're going to, you know, everybody pretty much, I would imagine most people then end up in a relationship. And this card, I don't think it has to relate to a romantic relationship, but it's relationships in general, whereby there is something to lose, I suppose. It can at times represent a really close friendship or something like that. But I think for the most part, it does speak to that romantic kind of wanting to be with another person in that way. And as I mentioned with this card before, and again, it depends on the imagery. I twisted the imagery on this card with Nikki to represent what we wanted the Lovers to represent, but dependent on other imagery and different cards, you know, sometimes I think the Lovers can look really a bit codependent. They're all hanging on to each other, and that tends to be a lot of the traditional imagery, is sort of hanging on, or like a bit overly close, a bit naked, Garden of Eden kind of vibes. Whereas here we thought more about the idea of commitment and communication and finding the right words and being also independent of one another whilst being together. And with the swans, there's a kind of mating for life thing going on there. So the Lovers is one of those cards that comes up, I guess, if there are relationship situations to be dealt with, to be focused on, to be grown and you know, the work to be done that goes along with anything that you're committed to. And again, it can show up in different ways. So, you know, you might have the lovers say, I don't know, with smack over it, the Three of Swords, which would potentially mean a relationship ending, or, you know, but I don't like to look into the future. So hopefully if that sort of thing came up, it'd be something you already knew. Or indeed, it could just be your relationship being impacted by traumas from your past. So you don't need to look at the cards and think, oh my God, I'm splitting up and I don't want to. You could look at it and think, actually, this relationship's being challenged by quite a lot of things at the moment. So I need to bring myself to the heart of it and do some healing and work. So I think I'll just do one more, which is the Chariot. Let me find that lovely elephant person. Are you? There she is. So this is my mate Julie, who is interesting. She's in her 60s. She's lived a really interesting life. She's traveled all over the world and done all kinds of things, like as a solo person for the most part of it. Before, it was kind of normal for women to do that kind of thing. But the Chariot is really about overcoming. And she's a spiritual traveler, so her destinations are always spiritual destinations. And I think that just a little bit of background about the cards kind of helps feed into what it might mean. You know, the Chariot is very much about overcoming difficulties, which don't need to be spiritual difficulties, just life problems in general, and feeling a sense of accomplishment, and that accomplishment pushing you forward, being like a catalyst and a motivation to kind of get to the next place. And often when we're in this place of success, it's like we fast forward just to get away from perhaps what it is we're escaping. So she's on her quad bike, and quite often there's like a little companion, so we have a little doggy there. And yeah, it's just it's a funny one, actually. Again, it's another one that eludes me a little bit as I talk about it. There are a few that just feel like they are just what they are, like you've overcome something and you're moving on. And to try and get into greater depths can sometimes feel challenging when it's just a single card.
Enjoy the ride. I know that's trite, but it's kind of
it's
the same to me.
Enjoy the ride. Watch how you're steering with all that kind of energy as well. I think sometimes that can be a thing, is that the Chariot can be a bit cocksure, like I've just achieved everything and I've overcome all my problems, so I'm going to drive 100 miles an hour, and before you know it, you've kind of gone on your side or something. But yeah, I think the Chariot is, so it's funny, you know, like I've been reading the cards. I was going to say 70 years. That would be a lie. 30 years. And I haven't had the Chariot come out that much for me at all. But that's not to say that at other points I won't. It's funny how you have like a collection of cards that you become more familiar with because they come out for you a lot. And then one will come out and you'll be like, oh, hardly ever see this one. And then maybe some way down the line, it will start coming out. It's like with Judgment, I didn't have that for a long time. And then it just came out on a loop for a long year. And now I feel like I know it. And I guess at some point the Chariot might do the same. But this is just evidence of how long it can take to get to know some of the cards, and not to worry if you don't immediately feel like there's like 78 of them. It takes a while to kind of get in a place of connection and closeness with them. But you will. It's a continued use, and finding different ways to play with them and explore them and express yourself through them.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. All right then, ladies. Well, shame Linda didn't join us. I will send her the recording. Did you guys want the recording of all of these as well?
I think particularly this one, actually. Yes. That would be nice. Yeah.
Okay, I'll make sure I get them. Sometimes they take a little minute to download, but I'll get that sent to you by tomorrow. And would you, I know you're not going to be available, Gabriella,
next Monday.
No. Becky, are you available at any earlier times in the day?
Monday, no, not this Monday. The earliest I could probably do is 5.
Okay, let me have a little think. I might make it slightly earlier, but I'll let you know beforehand. So go away, do that thing I said with the taking all the cards out, put them all in front of you and choose 6 you like and 6 you don't, and have a little think about what that is saying in itself as a reading. And then we'll go through the rest of the majors on Monday. And probably do a few little fun bits as well. All right then.
Brilliant.
Bye everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.